was a calm Sunday evening in Virginia, just 2 days before Ron Youngblood was supposed to move to Missouri with his daughter Brooklyn. Earlier that day, he had watched her walk away, holding her mom's hand. Everything seemed normal. There were no signs anything was wrong. But later that night, Ron's phone lit up with a voicemail from Veronica. It was short, but what she said changed everything. In just a few words, Ron's entire world collapsed. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. And at first, he didn't even understand what it meant. But the truth would hit him soon, and it was worse than anything he could have imagined. Near the end of his military career, Ron Youngblood believed it was finally time to settle down and build a family. After years of missions, relocations, and the rigid lifestyle of a soldier, he longed for something stable. In 2007, an assignment took him to Argentina, where he met Veronica, a charming woman with a young daughter named Sharon. Soon after, their family grew with the birth of Brooklyn. When they were relocated to San Diego, Ron felt like he had everything he'd ever wanted: a wife, 2 daughters, and a home filled with love. But just before a mission to Qatar in late 2013, cracks began to show. One evening, Ron came home to find Veronica drastically changed. Her long, light hair, something she'd always taken pride in, was cut short and dyed dark. It wasn't just a new look. It was a transformation. When he asked why, she brushed off the question. There were no explanations, just distance. On the day of his deployment, Ron asked if she would take him to the airport. She said no. So he kissed his daughters, said goodbye to Veronica, and climbed into a taxi. That moment stayed with him. The unease, the hollow farewell. Sharon was in elementary school. Brooklyn was barely 6 months old. 6 months overseas felt unbearable. Upon arriving in Qatar, Ron connected to the internet from his quarters. Messages began appearing, thanks to their shared family phone plan. But some texts weren't meant for him. One thread in particular caught his eye: romantic messages between Veronica and another man. She wrote about how much she loved kissing him, how she missed his touch. The intimacy was undeniable. Ron felt gutted. When he confronted her, she didn't deny it. She told him she was in love and planned to marry the other man and move back to Argentina. Ron told her calmly that if she wanted a divorce, they'd do it. But Brooklyn was his daughter. He wouldn't let her be taken away. Veronica responded with a threat. "We're only 10 miles from the Mexican border. You really think I can't just cross and take a flight to Argentina?" That moment chilled Ron to his core. The next 5.5 months in Qatar were torture. He felt helpless, paralyzed by distance, and haunted by the fear of losing his daughters. Then, unexpectedly, Veronica changed her tone. She said she regretted everything. She missed him, had been lonely, and wanted to give their marriage another try. Ron, still hoping to keep his family together, agreed. An opportunity arose to transition from pilot to military attaché. Veronica supported the move, and they were assigned to Honduras. But within 2 months, history repeated itself. Ron discovered new messages. This time, Veronica was making plans to move to Miami with another man. He confronted her. She showed no remorse. All she wanted was to leave Honduras, and she intended to take Brooklyn and Sharon with her. Ron realized then that nothing had changed. The trust was gone. There was no future left in the marriage. They agreed to divorce. But things took a darker turn. One night, Ron received a call from the U.S. Embassy. They wanted to meet. When they arrived, they asked that Veronica remain inside. Then came the question, "How often do you hit your wife?" Ron was stunned. Veronica had gone to Honduran authorities and accused him of physical and emotional abuse toward her and the girls. She claimed to fear for her life. Ron knew the weight of her words. In Honduras, diplomatic immunity didn't apply in domestic violence cases. The embassy's legal team urged him not to wait for a court date. They feared a setup, feared he could lose everything or even end up in a Honduran prison. The only option was to leave the country immediately. They fled with no time to plan. Back in the U.S., Veronica and the girls stayed with her sister while Ron found a small apartment. But Veronica wasn't done. She contacted his superiors, accusing him of neglect. She said the girls had no food, that they slept on the floor. The consequences for Ron could have been catastrophic: a court-martial, loss of career, even jail. He began to suspect she was motivated by money. Shared custody meant less financial support. The accusations were lies, and he knew it. But lies, repeated often enough, become weapons. He was forced to prove his innocence, again and again. Looking back, Ron realized Veronica would go to any length to get what she wanted, regardless of the damage left in her wake. She was relentless, unrepentant, and as painful as it was, he had no choice but to walk away from the woman who had once been his entire world. For Ron Youngblood, being doubted as a father, husband, or even a decent man was a crushing blow. He had always taken pride in those roles: provider, protector, parent. Every accusation made against him during the unraveling of his marriage was investigated. Ron's only goal was to defend himself, to protect his relationship with his daughters, and to avoid doing anything that could be twisted against him, anything that could get him arrested or removed from his home. He submitted receipts, answered questions, and followed every protocol. The authorities were satisfied, but deep down, Ron believed Veronica's true aim wasn't just to hurt him, it was to provoke him, hoping he'd lash out and give her an advantage in the custody battle. She wanted control, and she used their daughters as tools to assert it. The woman Ron had met in Argentina was gone. In her place was someone manipulative and dishonest, someone who weaponized motherhood and fatherhood to gain power. At that point, Veronica had full custody of the girls and complete control over when or if Ron could see them. She used this to her advantage. Ron sought legal counsel and filed for divorce. His attorneys advised him to spend as much time as possible with the girls to show the court he wasn't abandoning them. One afternoon, Ron arrived at Veronica's house for a scheduled visit with Brooklyn. Veronica opened the door and coldly told him she didn't want him to see Brooklyn. His daughter stood just behind her, crying. She wanted to see her father, but her mother said no. Ron was devastated. Veronica wasn't just denying him, she was using Brooklyn to assert dominance. She smiled while doing it, fully aware of the pain she was causing. He left and came back the next day, and the day after that. Every day. He was careful. So much was at stake, and he couldn't afford to react emotionally. She knew that and exploited it. Sharon, Veronica's older daughter, was in her first year of high school. She was bright, social, and adaptable. No matter where they moved, she made friends easily. For her 13th birthday, she chose to go camping with Ron. Not with her mom, not with her friends, just him. Veronica was upset by the decision, but to Ron, it was everything. Sharon never saw him as a stepfather, and he never saw her as anything less than his daughter. She was his best friend. They would bike together, go running, shop for clothes. Sharon valued his opinion. She confided in him about school, boys, and life. The only topic they never touched was what was happening between him and her mother. Life with Veronica had become increasingly erratic. Some days were tolerable, but others were pure chaos. If Ron forgot his wallet, Veronica would flush it. She poured bleach on his clothes, submerged his laptop in the bathtub. These were provocations, Ron believed. Attempts to make him react. He never did. She resumed her campaign against him, accusing him of physical and emotional abuse. Investigations followed, but again, there was no evidence. In fact, it was determined that Ron and Brooklyn were the ones suffering emotional harm. Even then, Ron couldn't understand where all the anger came from, but he knew he couldn't leave. Leaving meant abandoning the girls, and he couldn't do that. Then came the flood. One afternoon, while Ron was returning from work, Sharon called him in a panic. Water was pouring from the ceiling. He asked where her mother was. She was gone. He was still 20 to 30 minutes away, so he told Sharon to wait outside. He called Veronica, who told him a bizarre story, that Brooklyn, then just 3 years old, had turned on both bathroom taps, plugged the drain, locked the door, and returned to bed. The story made no sense. Ron knew it wasn't true. When he got home, water had been running for nearly 10 hours. The house was destroyed. That incident was, in his mind, the clearest sign yet of how unstable Veronica had become. Soon after, their final divorce hearing took place. Custody only applied to Brooklyn. The judge ruled for joint custody. Ron was required to provide the same standard of living Brooklyn had known while they were married. The court's decision seemed balanced until Veronica tried to overturn it. It was July 2018. At the new hearing, Veronica was arrogant. She believed that if she refused to comply, she wouldn't be forced to. She even taunted Ron, saying, "They won't let you take her from me." Ron feared she might be right. Losing Brooklyn was his greatest fear, but that day, the judge made it clear. Veronica could choose to stay or go, but if Ron was relocating to Missouri, he had the right to take Brooklyn with him. Ideally, Ron would have taken both girls to avoid separating them, but Veronica refused to let Sharon go. For nearly 10 years, Sharon had been his daughter. Letting her go was excruciating. That hearing was the first time Veronica was held accountable, when her words had to match her actions. She lost control, and that, Ron believed, is when she began crafting her next move. August 5, 2018, 2 days before Ron was scheduled to move to Missouri with Brooklyn, fell on a Sunday. And what happened next would shake everything again. That night, Ron received a call from Veronica. She asked to see Brooklyn that day. Her tone was neutral, not warm, not hostile. She mentioned she had gone to a gun show with a friend, something that didn't strike Ron as alarming. Veronica had mentioned guns before. It felt like idle conversation. While Brooklyn was getting ready, Veronica gave her daughter a kiss and a hug. Ron told Brooklyn he loved her. His final memory of her is watching her walk down the sidewalk, holding her mother's hand. That was the last time he saw her alive. In the middle of the night, Ron was awakened by the light of his phone. He had a voicemail. It was from Veronica. The message was brief, chilling. She said she had shot Brooklyn and Sharon, and that she was going to take her own life. She ended by saying she hated him. At first, Ron couldn't process it. He played the message again. He sat in disbelief. Then the phone rang. It was the Fairfax Police Department. He asked, trembling, how his daughters were. Brooklyn was dead. Sharon was still alive, but in surgery, and not expected to make it. The voicemail would later be used as evidence. Veronica's voice was flat, detached, no emotion. Ron knew immediately it wasn't a threat. It was real. When he arrived at the hospital, Sharon had survived her first operation. She was on a ventilator and unable to speak. Seeing her that way, broken and helpless, crushed Ron. The one person she should have trusted most had done this to her. He leaned close and told her he loved her, told her to keep fighting, that she wasn't alone. And when she reached for his finger and squeezed it, he knew she understood. But the battle was only beginning. Sharon endured 4 more surgeries. Each one took more of her. Until finally, doctors told Ron there was nothing left to remove. The only thing keeping her alive was the machine. Ron had to make impossible decisions. He had to step aside while someone else arranged Brooklyn's funeral, because his focus had to be on Sharon. Then came the choice no parent should ever face: removing life support. Ron had to let his daughter go. Later, Veronica confessed. She said she shot Sharon first. When Sharon cried out in pain, she left the room and went into where Brooklyn slept. She shot her in the head. When she emerged and saw Sharon was still alive, she shot her again. It wasn't a moment of madness. It had been planned for months, a calculated act of vengeance. She wanted to destroy Ron the only way she knew how, by taking away the 2 people he loved most. Veronica wasn't sick. She was cruel, cold, evil. After the killings, she even took photos of herself, her face blank, inhuman. She was no longer the woman Ron had once loved. Ron said it plainly. Anyone who kills a child is a coward. If she wanted revenge, she should have taken my life. At least then the girls would still be here. Veronica was eventually sentenced. The penalty could have been death, but Ron asked for life in prison. The girls were gone. Nothing would change that. But at least, he said, keeping her in this world was the only way he could still protect his daughters, to ensure she would never get near another child again. Ron has only a few things left of his girls: a photo of Sharon and a bracelet she made him, found after her death. He wears it always. She's still with me, he says. Wherever I go, Sharon goes too. Brooklyn, his mini-me, was generous and kind even at age 5. At her funeral, Ron had her fingerprints engraved into a ring. He wears it on his hand. It feels, he says, like holding hers. He keeps Brooklyn's ashes. She was never buried. Ron made a memorial in Missouri, a symbol of what was lost. When he dies, he wants their ashes, his and Brooklyn's, mixed together and buried alongside Sharon's bracelet. It's the only way he knows to stay close to them. He used to whisper to them during storms or when they were scared, "I've got you. I'll protect you." But the hardest truth any parent has to learn is this: no matter how much you love them, no matter how strong your promise is, you can't protect them from everything. Ron Youngblood's story is not just one of tragedy. It's a story of a father's fierce love, unimaginable loss, and the haunting reality that even the strongest protector cannot shield their children from all harm. His journey is a reminder that sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought in uniform. They're fought within the walls of your own home, against the very people you once trusted most. And still, Ron fights, not with weapons, but with memory, truth, and love. Because even in loss, a father never stops being a father. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.